Welcome to Every Musical Ever. This podcast contains strong language and it's not suitable for children.
Welcome to the Hamilton episode of Every Musical Ever. It's happening, we've all watched it this weekend, and we're talking about it with my guest Josie Lane right now.
It's time to chat, just you and me. How many musicals can there be? I hope that there's infinity. Kettle on and pour the tea. Every musical ever. It's a show that is so clever. It's a very fine endeavor. Every musical ever.
Hello, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Richard Carroll. As I said, I'm joined by the wonderful Josie Lane to discuss Hamilton today. Have you watched it? Did you watch the movie on Disney+? I'm sure you have if you're listening to this right now, or that you've seen the show in person. Josie and I both watched the movie pretty much as soon as it came out on Disney+, and we recorded this podcast episode on Saturday night Australian time, although Josie's in the UK, so it was Saturday morning for her. And we edited it frantically to get it up for you as soon as possible so that we could join in the Hamilton conversation. I feel like we barely scratched the surface with this one. It was kind of inevitable, I suppose. I felt like we could do an entire series of podcasts about Hamilton, and people do. So there's a lot we didn't get into, but as always, this is just a conversation rather than a full briefing on the entire musical. There will be more in our Hamilton Encore episode on Friday, and of course, we want your correspondence as always. You can reach us on social media at everymusicalpod, or email everymusicalpod@gmail.com. There's links in the episode description. And you can hear a complete version of my and Josie's conversation on our Patreon page, or you can even watch it on video. There's also a link below. Thank you to all of you who've signed up to the Patreon already. It's been really amazing to see how that community is growing. I understand, of course, that not everyone can, and if that's not something you're able to do to support the show, then feel free to just give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to this podcast. That also does us massive favours. Or tell a friend. On Friday's Encore episode, I'll also be talking to some cast members from Hamilton on Broadway. All right, well, let's get into the conversation. Here is me and Josie Lane talking about Hamilton.
Every musical ever, you can listen wherever, no script whatsoever, skip an episode never. Every musical ever, squeeze.
Did you watch the movie?
I did watch the movie.
And?
Loved it.
Of
Loved
course.
it. It's now the third time I've seen Hamilton. In New York, I saw it in 2016. So I saw Javier, the original Javier Munoz, which arguably you'd go is the original Hamilton, because even though Lin writes for himself, he doesn't write for himself, but writes the character and he performs it. In the process, Javier is on the floor while Lin rewrites and works stuff.
Is that true? I guess that makes sense, yeah.
So it's kind of funny to have these like two different but integral versions of this one pivotal role.
So he was the understudy or / alternate for Lin and then took over the role. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And took over.
Wow.
I had listened to the soundtrack on repeat just so much. I just loved it so much. And then finally getting in. By the way, it is an ordeal to get in. I'd been to New York several times when Hamilton was on and hadn't seen it. Famously, when it was in previews and my very best friend Chris Scalzo was like, hey, I can get us tickets for Lin-Manuel Miranda's new show. But it was super expensive. So I was like, nah, probs not. Can you believe that? That happens in New York. Sometimes when there's this new show buzzing, I feel like such a basic person where I'm like, no, I'm scared to take a risk.
But Hamilton, by the time Hamilton went to Broadway, there was already a huge amount of buzz around it. You know, like from it played 6 months at the Public Theatre.
And obviously why the tickets were so expensive. The process of seeing Hamilton is not an easy process.
Yeah.
Unless you're like filthy rich.
Yeah.
We had gone in the week that Mike Pence went to the show and was booed.
Yeah, wow.
A couple of days after that happened. So Republicans were calling for boycott because they're like, how could they treat a political leader in that way. That's so not what the show stands for. And it's like, well, I don't know. Anyway, that's why we got these incredible tickets. But I did have to line up for an entire school day to get the tickets. And it was freezing cold.
It was because someone had returned them because they were outraged on behalf of Mike Pence.
Yeah, and this is the story that almost, I'm married now, by the way, but this is the story that almost ended our relationship. Because the people have to be there. So everyone that's going in after the half-hour call, you have to be there. And Jeremy was running late.
Oh, God.
He was like pushing old ladies and children over to get, when I finally was like, I have let 3 people in ahead of me, hurry up. And it was like the 15-minute call, what are you doing? Which was great for us. We had a great time.
We should probably talk about the actual show.
We will. Now we will. But no, do you know what though, Richard? That is a big part of the show. Getting tickets is a huge part of the show, and it's a huge buzz of the show, and it's almost like this rite of passage because, you know, it's so hard to actually just get in.
Yeah, and the vibe of actually being in the theatre, like we are seeing
Yes.
Hamilton tonight. It's like opening
Yes.
night every night, yeah.
And then I sat there and it started, and I just felt this overwhelming feeling inside of my body that it was like the hairs on my back stood up, but, you know, I don't have a hairy back, but you can imagine if I was a very hairy person. And it was just this gasp of air, and I didn't come down to until wait for it. I knew the choreography would be amazing because it's the same team that did In the Heights, and I know that was brilliant, but I had been completely moved by the dance, and I was like, wow, I did not expect that. I did not expect how encompassing this was, and the fact that you see everyone on stage all the time. I will also say it was one of the first musicals that I'd been to in New York specifically where it wasn't so loud either.
Oh, I guess, you know, a big part of the show being a rap show is how much we have to be able to hear every line and how difficult it is. You know, the actors have a lot of responsibility with their diction, but I guess also sound-wise, you can't blast it too loud because you won't be able to hear what's going on. That's something that really impressed me because obviously I've listened to the soundtrack so much and watching. It's funny when you see the original cast as well because it is the same actors who are on the soundtrack, so you know what they sound like, but they sound slightly different. I mean, I thought they sounded fantastic in the I thought they sounded fantastic in the live movie, but it impressed on me even more the fact that this must be so difficult just to do everything that they're doing and make sure that every night they're getting every single one of those syllables across.
Oh yeah,
so the audience can actually understand and hear what they're saying. Because it's so fast so much of the time.
That's right. And it's like 8 shows a week for them too.
Yeah.
And it's quite emotionally intense material at points. And they're speaking and singing and moving the whole time. And you know that they didn't just do it for the movie, to be honest. Because when I saw it, they were the same. Like just that those guttural, visceral kind of primal sounds they make with their voices. Like when they're like really emotional about things and they get right in their throat when they're angry. It's like, whoa.
Let's talk about some of the original cast, seeing as we've just been talking about the movie. Now, Lin is, you know, a national treasure, international treasure of musical theatre, and, you know, what he's done, he's a genius, and what he's done in creating this is incredible. He's not necessarily perfect casting, you know, as like a type.
Lin-Manuel, the cogs are constantly working, and he is effortlessly, even though you can still see them working, impressing us with how good he is. And you can tell that's kind of his personality too,
Yeah, he's
which
like
I
the little
love.
nerdy kid who wants to show off all
Yes,
his knowledge.
but that's what he is.
Yeah.
I listened to him on Conan O'Brien's podcast, and he talks about what really got him into theatre was being Conrad Birdie in this production when he was in high school. And he's just like, I wanted to feel that. You know, I was like Elvis. I was the coolest person. I just chased that every day. Like that he's chasing this Conrad Birdie high.
Yeah.
But he's a genius. He is a literal genius.
Absolutely. I mean,
Completely.
First of all, the fact that this is, you know, the work of one man. I mean, obviously not one man. Obviously there's collaborators, there's, you know, orchestrators, arrangers, there's a director, there's, you know, all of the other people that shape the show. But he wrote the book, music and lyrics. And the fact that he took a completely unlikely subject matter, the story of Alexander Hamilton, that no one would thought would have made an interesting musical at all. Then
That he was reading the book on a holiday, by the way.
I know. Then made it a hip hop rap musical where all of the founding fathers and all the other characters are played by people of color. You know, all of these things, and like to see it so clearly and commit to it, and then make it what it is, not just make it work, but make it into something so transcendent and something that is universally loved by fans of music theatre and outside. Like, it would be so easy for, it's like, it's a rap hip hop musical, so it's going to be kind of niche, and only people who are into rap and hip hop, but also into musical theatre enough to go to a musical are going to be into it.
But he's so into musicals, though. That's the other thing. That's why he's so
of course.
into musicals.
But there must have been so many people who said, okay, where's the Venn diagram? It's like people who love musical theatre are interested in the story of Alexander Hamilton and also into rap and hip hop. People must be like, this
apparently
is
not,
commercial suicide.
though. Did you watch afterwards when they talked about the making, and they were just like, we were all in
the actors,
with this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No. Also, the director and the producing team, they were
Yes.
all on board. Also, Lin was one of the producers, P.S.
Yeah, but okay, yes, that's true. I mean, first of all, he's obviously working with a lot of people from In the Heights. It's not like he didn't have a proven track record. He'd already won several Tonys for In the Heights. So I guess people didn't say this is shit because it was him. But
But
it
wasn't a hard sell.
It must have seemed like an unlikely, suggestion. And from what I gather from what sort of the cast and the creatives say is that they all knew it was going to be amazing, but they had no idea it was going to be such a commercial smash. I guess that's what I mean.
Yeah, because they did talk about, like, how did this get better over and over again?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I can imagine, could you imagine being in that process? That's crazy. I'm so glad to be alive in a time where we're in an integral work in the musical theatre book
Absolutely.
of time.
Like, it's our generation's West Side Story or A Chorus Line.
Yes.
It changes the form, and that'll be interesting to see. Over the next however many years, will we see a lot more hip hop and rap musicals now that it's been proved once and for all that they can work? Will we just see a lot more diverse casting?
But more specifically, it's the music of the time period that you are currently in. Mm-hmm. And how music shifts, because I feel like a lot of musicals strive to be that golden era of musicals that's like in the 40s.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that's what musicals sound like. No, this is today. This is what we hear. This is what we see.
But then modern musicals, something like a Dear Evan Hansen or whatever, or Next to Normal, or it's like they sound supposedly modern, but it's just a modern musical theatre sound. Doesn't sound like songs on the radio. Which I think is interesting. And maybe something like Waitress comes closest to sounding like something on the radio. But Hamilton, and this is one of the things as well about its huge success, is that the cast recording became such a huge hit. Apparently it's the biggest selling cast recording ever, which is amazing when you think that. But if you think that, like, in the 50s, the South Pacific cast recording or the My Fair Lady cast recording would be the biggest selling album of the year. I mean, obviously we've got a bigger population now and it's much more international, but it's gone 6 times platinum, the cast recording.
Wow.
So that, I think, is a really interesting
I wonder
thing.
what it will do again now that the movie's been released.
Absolutely.
I wonder if it will
Yeah. Because even after it won the Tonys, it shot back up the charts. And then, of course, there's been all of the remixes and the
the Hamilton mixtape.
several the mixtapes and the.
I like to think about. So I'm about to do a gig in a couple of weeks, but I'm singing songs from Annie Get Your Gun and like King and I.
Oh.
And I sit there thinking to myself, oh, how would you contemporize this song? And then watching Hamilton made me go, how funny to think that in the future, people might be like, now how do I make this more contemporary? And how am I going to change this?
It's very 2000s, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, oh, that's, I don't know about this anymore. I wonder if it would come to a time where I was like, that's really tone deaf and dated. It's like, what?
Well, do you know what? I mean, this is a sidebar, but it's interesting that you're starting to see 4 or 5 years after its debut, starting to see some conversations around how it glosses over the founding fathers' attitudes to slavery, and all that kind of thing. So people are starting to not turn on it by any means. And I think Lin also is the first one to acknowledge that's a story that he didn't get into. And, that, yes, we are celebrating these men who were mostly slave owners. And although Hamilton expressed opposition to slavery, he certainly didn't do as much as he could have done and all that kind of thing. So that's an interesting development with obviously everything that's going on in the world right now.
That is true. You are right there as well. And then a lot of people do have issues about the women not being portrayed in any certain way, which I don't side with that, but I've had discussions with people, heated discussions.
It's certainly true that they're supporting roles. I mean, obviously I'm not a woman, so I guess it's not really for me to say, but watching the show, I felt Angelica and Eliza as an even bigger presence than they come across on the cast recording.
Yes.
Yeah, obviously they get some of the great songs, but like I think when you watch the show, you really realize how key they are. And also, I think because they sing about him so much, that it seems in the cast recording a bit more like they're just on the sidelines singing about him. But when you watch the show, they feel more centered, I think.
Oh, big time.
So, just some little facts for you. The Broadway cast album debuted at number 12 on the Billboard 200, which is the highest entrance for a cast recording since 1963.
Wow.
Went on
What
to
was
reach-
the 1963 one?
I don't know, but I would
Please
guess...
be Annie.
I would guess 1963... Don't know. I'd have to
playing
look it up.
trivia now.
Have to look it up.
Maybe we'll let the listeners tell us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we do it on the Extras Encore podcast. It went on to reach number 3 on the Billboard 200 and number 1 on the Billboard Rap Albums chart, which is unsurprisingly the first time that a
Whoa.
Broadway cast album had been number 1 on the Rap Album chart. Obviously won a Grammy for Best Musical Theatre Album, and it's the best-selling cast album ever, 6 times platinum.
Wow.
The Hamilton mixtape, which was a collection of remixes, covers and samples, debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200.
Well, it's
There you go.
also a great album as well.
And then there's the Hamil Drops.
Oh, what's that?
It's like Hamilton related recordings. Some of them are like early versions of songs that were cut from the show.
Songs are cut from the show?
Yeah. So hang on a second,
Wow.
I'll find it for you. Oh, there's one that Weird Al Yankovic does a Hamilton polka.
That's great.
There's Lin-Manuel Miranda and Ben Platt doing a mashup of Story of Tonight and You'll Be Found. There's a song called First Burn, which is 5 actresses who've played Eliza in different productions who've seen the
yes, I've
first
seen that.
draft
I've
of,
seen that.
of Burn,
Yeah.
which was quite different. Theodosia Reprise, which was cut from the show. There's a song called Cheering For Me Now, which is an original song with music by John Kander and lyrics by Lin, based on the 1788 Federal Procession. And then also the final song is One Last Time 44 remix, which is named because Barack Obama was the 44th president. And it's got
It's him speaking
Christopher
over the
Jackson
top. Yeah.
singing and with B.B. Winans, and it's got Barack Obama reciting the lines from George Washington's farewell address. So
Well-
all of that is available for you. You know, they also released the Hamilton Instrumentals, which is the cast recording with no
Yes.
vocals, so that you can just sing along.
Yes. But
Yeah.
not even so you can just sing along.
But also so you can sing
can
along.
hear the musicality
That was
of
what they
the
said,
show.
and I think that's wonderful. But I also do think it's basically so that people could sing
No,
along.
you've got to get nerdier into this, because without the lyrics, every single person has a musical theme. You can tell
Oh,
how
totally.
much Lin is inspired by Sondheim.
I'm not here to diss the orchestrations or the complexity of the music. I'm
Yes,
just saying
you
that's
are.
not why
You're
they
saying
released the
it's a sing-along.
instrumentals album. No, of course, the motifs and the themes, are so
Insane.
evident. To what degree they're maintained throughout the show is pretty incredible. And also, I think it's so clever in terms of helping us follow the show, because it moves so
Yes.
fast and the lyrics are so fast
Yes.
and keeping track of who the characters are. And we've got people, splitting roles and
And how much they put subtext in there as well.
the music, you mean?
Yeah, the music puts a
Yeah.
lot of subtext in there.
Have you listened to that episode of the podcast Strong Songs about Satisfied?
Did I not send it to you? I thought,
Oh, did you?
no, maybe I didn't.
Oh, well, I listened to
it,
I listened to it anyway. It's fascinating, and that's obviously that's one of the highlights of the show, both
Yeah.
musically but also in terms of the staging. And Satisfied when they rewind.
The rewind, yes.
Oh, incredible! But yeah, listening to that episode really made me go, "Oh my god!" The more you dig, the more there is in the.
Oh my
how
god!
clever the
And
music
he's
and the
not the only
arrangements.
one that does that. There is another famous YouTuber that breaks down music, and I forget his name now, but obviously we'll look it up and add it later.
Sure.
That does breakdowns as well that are very fascinating, but specifically breaks down Alexander Hamilton, the song, and shows how many of people's themes are in it.
Ah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
We don't need any more parodies of that, by the way.
No, we
We're all good for parodies of the song Alexander Hamilton. Thank you.
no, we're not. Please send them my way.
Yeah.
But then you've got the rest of the cast. So we've talked about Lin.
We've literally only talked
Then
about
you've
Lin.
got Leslie Odom Jr.
Leslie Odom smashing it. I mean, he was the
Smashing
star
it.
for me. And again, I think that's something that when you watch it, he really feels like it's his story more than on the cast
Yeah.
recording. I mean, obviously he's the narrator, but also his performance was just so
Stunning.
great. God, he's good.
Yeah, he just doesn't express anything, and he finally does. And obviously too much. It's like, yeah, there's a reason why you had to wait for it and bottle that, Aaron Burr, because you got a lot going on. I'm so glad you bottled it for years.
But the show is basically hung around. Obviously, in the opening number, he says that he shot him, and
Yeah.
so we already know from the beginning that we're working towards this moment, and the moment of that duel, it is Burr's story. It's Burr who makes the fatal error that he has to live with for the rest of his
Yeah.
life, and
Yes.
Hamilton is just sort of the passive recipient of that. So that's why I think that, of course, it's Hamilton's story, and of course, he gets most stage time and all that kind of thing, but the key sort of like thing that the whole show hangs around is Burr's decision and his own sort of legacies.
I loved him in Harriet as well. He was
I haven't seen that.
like, it's great. Cynthia Erivo's amazing. Janelle Monáe, like the whole movie is brilliant, but he's in it too, and he's like just as smooth and cool and amazing in that movie as he is as Aaron Burr as
Right.
well.
Yeah.
Like it's just because he full on wigs out at the end of the second act, but he's still got this like handsome charmingness about completely wigging out and losing his shit over this.
Yeah.
It's like, you didn't win, calm down. But can we say lisp?
Oh,
So he doesn't have a lisp in real life. Aaron Burr on the movie version lisp. When I saw it,
I didn't
I
notice
saw a
that.
different actor play Burr. Didn't notice a lisp. When I saw it in London, big time lisp. And I was like, oh, that must have been that actor. And then I saw it here and I was like, wait a second. Leslie Odom Jr.'s got a lisp in this. Does he actually have a lisp in real life?
But
and then
hang on, but he doesn't on the cast recording.
he doesn't on the cast recording. What is this lisp about?
I didn't notice it in the movie, I have to say. Maybe it's just
Oh,
his
wow.
mouth tired after 8 shows a week.
Maybe it's a character choice.
Maybe Aaron Burr really had a lisp.
That's what I'm wondering. Do
we
we want to
Google it?
research that right now? Did
I'll
Aaron Burr
research
have a
it
lisp?
live. Man looks up something
And you'll
on the
see that it's
internet.
a trending topic, and the Easter egg that you missed, Aaron Burr's lisp.
Okay, I googled Aaron Burr lisp, and the first result is someone saying that the person playing Burr in Chicago had a very obvious lisp. Someone saying the person playing in London had an obvious lisp.
Lisp.
I'm not finding anything that says that he had one in real life.
Now you're going to watch the movie again, and you're going to hear it.
Oh, I'm going to watch it again, all right, don't you worry.
Yeah.
Okay, we need
But he
to,
had a
let's
lisp.
carry on. Okay, Philippa Sue.
Oh my God.
What a
Philippa
voice.
Sue.
What a beautiful voice. Yeah.
What a voice. And obviously me, obsessed with anyone that is mixed race Asian. Obsessed.
Correct. Yeah.
I find even though I'm in my 30s, I'm like, no, I'm still a child and I need heroes. And she became one of my heroes immediately. I was like, oh, you're a bit Asian? I love you.
She's glorious. She I could just listen to her sing like forever, but
But
also
her presence.
a tricky role
presence.
to give agency to, and I think she is so wonderful in it. Doesn't come across weak when she forgives him for his
No,
infidelity and all
absolutely
that
not.
stuff. So yeah, I think she's wonderful.
Absolutely not. Every time I see the show, even listen to it, cry like crazy. I also famously don't cry at shows, bawling my eyes out when Philip died. Because he did this. I think
Yeah.
that he did it. It's his fault. It's his
Well,
fault.
it's
He
toxic
didn't have the
masculinity's fault
Yes, it is. But he gave him his guns.
because of toxic masculinity.
I know, but then he's at the hospital trying to be like, shh, I don't know how, dear Alexander, did you know? No. He didn't even say no. He's like, I didn't know or did know. He's like, yes, he knew. It was him. It was him, Eliza. Oh, your toxic husband. But her performance of that, but every time, and multiple versions that I've seen of the show, still cry. Like at Eddie, I could be watching a comedy and then watch that moment again and just cry my eyes out. But her visceral reaction in that primal reaction
Yeah.
she did, and to then sing beautifully immediately afterwards is like, wow,
Yeah.
what a talent.
She's amazing. And also to have been part of the creation of Hamilton and Comet.
Was she? I
Yeah.
don't think she was in the creation of Comet, was she?
I think so, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know about
I
like
see.
early workshops or whatever, but she was Natasha.
Yes, she was too. I
Mm.
would have loved to see her as Natasha. My favourite part of the show was getting the little pastry.
Okay.
They give pastries.
Famously, yeah. Don't they give
Yeah.
out vodka?
Yes, they also give out vodka. But again, I was seeing some matinees of some real hit shows, which is the most around and lining up for ages before. So every time I go to see these shows, I'm exhausted.
Yeah. Oh, that's like when I went to see Next to Normal on Broadway, and I went to a Saturday matinee, and I'd been out all night. It's New York, and and you get to New York and you forget about the New York measures that they do of the
Yes.
spirits. And I dragged myself out of bed at like
Yep.
12:15 to get to a 1:00 matinee. Didn't have anything to eat. Was sitting there feeling
But the
like
commitment
death.
is
And then
there.
just
That's the most
bam,
important
bam,
thing.
bam, loud rock music. I was like, I hate this show more than life itself.
Next to Normal is not a show to see when you're completely hungover, by the
Well,
way.
thanks for telling me. I could have used that information 10 years
Well,
ago.
I'm so sorry that I wasn't in your life then.
Hi, I'm just breaking in for a minute to ask you to consider donating to ID Know Yourself. It's an Aboriginal-led, not-for-profit mentoring organisation that supports Aboriginal young people in out-of-home care and those who have contact with the juvenile justice system. I first heard the founder Isaiah Dorr on the Always Was, Always Will Be Our Stories podcast, talking about his own experiences with out-of-home care as a kid and why he founded the organisation. I found him really inspiring. ID Know Yourself aims to establish belonging, discover purpose, and empower positive choices. You can learn more or make a tax-deductible donation at idknowyourself.com. There's a link in our episode description. Renee Elise Goldsberry.
Won a Tony.
She is phenomenal. You know she's nearly
Yes.
50.
No, I did not know that.
She's 50 next year.
Wow.
I know. That's beside the point. She's incredible. The acting, the singing. She's also a musician, she releases albums and stuff. She's phenomenal. And in that Satisfied, I think in that number alone, she does so much to go like, oh no, the women in this show are also going to kill it,
Yeah, but also does nothing. Like, I love that about, she just burns it so hard with intention. She doesn't have to do anything.
Absolutely.
It's just like...
And just the inner strength, the core of strength is just...
People exist that are like that. People are alive today that can do that over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And then just go home and look after their kids.
Yep.
Like, ridiculous.
100%. Lynn said on Twitter today that she was the only one who never lost her voice, got sick, nothing. She was like that every single show with no problems.
But it's also because she just made it so perfectly her. Like, I never think that's something to wave a flag about because, sometimes 8 shows a week is a hard gig, but it just shows how suited she was for the role.
Yeah, fair.
And how much she made it her own. Because she just has this softness to the way that she produces that sound that obviously she can produce it over and over again, but this intensity that you just wouldn't think you could sustain that 8 shows a week. Like, she really gets in there with her voice.
Yeah.
And like,
100%.
especially when she's like, and her eyes, like she belts it. And it's so clear, but it also is quite primal and somewhat affected in a way because she's yearning and she knows what she lost and she's grieving. That's a song about grief.
Yeah, yeah.
And she plays what that is so well. Do you think she deserved to win the Tony over Philippa, or do you think they both should have won a Tony? Wait,
They
were
weren't,
they in different
nominated
categories?
in the same category. Philippa lost to Cynthia Erivo.
Oh, wow. Okay. Fair enough, though,
Yeah.
because that performance was
Yeah.
next level.
Yeah. Cynthia Erivo also famously ran the New York Marathon and then did
Yes.
the show that night.
I was also in New York when that happened.
My God, insane. Anyway, we're not here to talk about her. David Diggs, obsessed with someone who's just like a freestyle rapper who's in a band with Lin-Manuel, gets cast in the
Yep.
show, wins a Tony, fucks
Yep.
back off again.
Well, he's now in TV shows. And
Yeah, I know, but
movies.
I mean, he didn't stick around on Broadway. He was just like,
Yeah.
what is this? Oh yeah, I can do this. I can fucking slay.
Yeah.
And
you
then
can
win
tell
a
that it's
Tony.
just not his vibe. Yeah. It's funny. I actually think Lafayette and Jefferson is the other star. Like, I know you said Aaron Burr, but I go, I'm into Lafayette and
Well, it's
Jefferson
the scene
as the other
stealing.
star.
It's the one that's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, each time either of those come out, it's like they lift the mood. It's a bit of fun. It's like you need that energy in the show.
And just a real every time crowd pleaser, winning every line. David,
Yeah.
incredible.
But it's also the prime example when you watch David Diggs do it. You can tell that because obviously Lynn knew him so well, and it was created sort of around him to his strengths, and so you can tell that his energy comes through both of the characters. There's similarity between Lafayette and Jefferson because they're both basically David Diggs.
But that I'm also here for. I love when
100%.
something is written only for that person. It's like, yeah, I don't have to act. I'm just going to roll in. I'm going to do 8 shows a
Absolutely.
week too because this is written only for me.
Absolutely. I'm also a big fan. And the other person we should mention is Christopher Jackson, who plays George Washington. Heaven.
God, who was also in The Heights as well. He's like
That's
a
right,
real
he was
key
Benny.
ingredient. I like that how Lynn keeps those key ingredients in the pot. He's just like, I know these work because he clearly has a team of people he loves and just keeps using them to his strength and their strengths as well.
Agree, yeah.
And isn't it a performance?
Yeah, that sort of older statesman vibe is written so well as well, like the difference in the language that he uses and stuff. And that one last time is such a beautiful moment in the show.
Everyone shall have their own vine and fig tree. Like, it really also shows how much religion is still very much a part of America, by the way. Mm-hmm. That it was a big part of the building of America.
Yeah.
But I'm like, wow, yeah, people really are also very God-fearing in America and were then and are still now.
Yeah. Well, and even if they're not God-fearing, they're used to the language of it and they can talk about it without
Yes.
embarrassment. Like, I think in Australia or the UK, we kind of got like, oh, God, why are you talking about God or Jesus? Are you a bit of a weirdo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that moment, it really sums up his storyline and the grandeur that is George Washington. He wrote it so perfectly, the character of George Washington, I think,
Yeah.
as well. But that Obama mix, amazing. Also, speaking of Obama, that this musical sprung up with him as president. Like, what a time. What a time.
Yeah, that gave it so much potency because obviously there's not exact parallels. He wasn't an immigrant, but he was, this mixed race boy from, a single parent family raised by his grandparents. And yeah, absolutely someone who had all the odds stacked against him to become president and did it out of his own intelligence and charisma. So yeah, lots of parallels.
Literally wrote his way to where he became.
Absolutely.
When we go back to the writing of it and talking about it being problematic because of the forefathers having slaves and all these kind of things, and that he didn't really talk about it. But what inspired Lin, first and foremost, was the immigrant story. And he thinks of his family, and that's why he put it to stage. And I think that's why it resonates as such human truths, even though it's kind of elitist as far as the story is concerned. It's like, it's not quite what you think, but at the same time it is. I don't know. Sorry.
No, I know what you mean. I think, look, obviously it's not for me to say, but I think that the very fact of taking this founding story and these founding fathers who were racist and sexist, and but taking that story and having it interpreted by people of color, it doesn't take away obviously the issues, but it's not that the show ignores them. I mean, slavery is mentioned quite a few times, and so is the fact that women can't vote. So I think it's something they're very conscious of, and I think that's part of the political decision to have people of color cast and creatives interpret the story. Yeah, Jasmine Cephas Jones.
Yes, original Peggy.
And Mariah.
I like that they have this alternate Anne Peggy tour. They call it the Anne
I know,
Peggy
it's literally
tour.
called the Anne Peggy tour. Isn't that great?
Anne Peggy.
Yeah.
The Schuyler sister that in actual real life is the one that introduced Eliza to Alexander Hamilton.
Yeah, there's a bit of fast and loose with the old... And Angelica was already married, apparently, when she met Hamilton.
Already married to an English...
Yeah.
So it's funny how she's like, I'm the oldest and the wittiest and the gossip in New York City. And she's like, I can't marry because I'm the oldest and I have to marry a man who's rich. It's like, well, actually, she didn't do that at all.
But and also that whole thing of Satisfied, which the heartbreaking moment of the show where it's like, oh, she should have married him, but she couldn't because she had to marry someone rich. Well, no, she couldn't because
she already was married.
And also there's
I
not
think
really
had a
any
child
evidence
at that point.
not really any evidence they were in love with each other. They definitely had a real connection and corresponded and had an intellectual connection. But anyway.
And she is actually buried near him, which is beautiful. So clearly they were such close.
But isn't that because they're all buried in the Schuyler
but
plot or whatever?
siblings, they're close. Yeah,
okay. The staging and the set design and stuff, I loved. I guess it's partly because, or maybe largely because it came out of the public theatre. It would be so easy, not easy, expensive, but easy to see that a show like this, creative team and producers would say, okay, well, it's about these big events and it takes place over a long span of time and different locations. So we need all these different sets for different things. And they're like, no, what we need is one set and basically the same costumes all the way through. And then we just have like chairs and lighting. When we see the Constitutional Congress or when we see, whatever else like that, we're just going to represent it theatrically. And that was part of the joy of watching it, was just seeing the simple theatrical devices that are so evocative.
Oh, the cabinet battles.
Yeah.
But I also like the really obvious and subtle changes of like they're all wearing blue jackets. They wear the blue-red jackets when they're at war. Then they take off the jackets. Then they're wearing different colored jackets. Like, because the set is exactly the same except for like moving staircase, couple of chairs and tables. Yeah, they utilize it really well because the set looks like a ship and a bar and it looks like so many things, but it looks like a ship for most of it. When you're first there, it's like, this is a ship. What is this?
Right, or like a shipyard,
Yeah, it just looks like a shipyard.
I guess it's sort of representative of him coming over from...
Yes, that's why. I just thought it was like, oh, it's like the Battle of Kips Bay the whole time. No, that's what it is. You're exactly right there.
Well, thank you. I love being exactly right. One thing that I did think about watching the show is we have this, casting of people of colour playing all these white men, etc., but no cross-gender casting. And I wonder whether that was ever considered or...
Guess what?
What?
He encourages it. So now he's got amateur rights that are out there and he...
Amateur rights for Hamilton are out there?
yeah, apparently they're out there, or he's about to
Or there
release
will be
them
at some point,
and
yeah.
he encourages cross-gender casting.
Well, that's great, but to be honest, cross-gender casting in amateur productions is pretty standard. I would be really interested to
Let's do a production of Hamilton.
because
Richard.
once you've established the principle that the actor playing the character doesn't have to have any of the same characteristics as the historical person, why not cross-gender cast? You know, we talked about the female characters and whether or not they were sort of central enough to the story, but if you're going to tell a story about a time when all of the key players were men because of, you know, the patriarchy, why not have women assume some of those roles as well?
Who knows? Maybe we will see productions where it is, like
Maybe in the
eventually
Australian
after
cast.
it goes to us. Maybe in the Australian cast. Don't you dare! I'm triggered by you saying that.
You'd be a great Jefferson/Lafayette.
Thank you so much,
You
but
would.
I would actually want to be James Reynolds. That's
Okay,
my role.
done. In the Hayes production/regional tour that we'll do in
I'll be
15 years'
James
time. Yeah.
Reynolds.
Done. Seeing as we just talked about the whole female angle as well, let's talk about the ending. The fact that obviously Eliza gets the sort of the ending narrative and we sort of hear her story, which is interesting. And her story is about largely maintaining his legacy, although of course then, you know, she founds the orphanage and all that kind of stuff, which is beautiful, and she gets the last moment in the show. What do you think about that very last moment when she sort of looks out and gasps?
I don't know. I think of it as the story is for her. Like, he did this for her, in a way. Even though he did it for himself. It's very Walter White, I did it for me and I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Like, spoiler alert, that's Breaking Bad,
But
P.S.
what is that moment? You know what I mean? The very, very last moment of the show. She looks out and she gasps as if she's been surprised by something.
You know what? I will say as well, it played differently all 3 times I saw it.
Oh.
When I saw it in London, for me it was her dying breath, that she finally saw her husband again. That's what I
That makes
got
sense.
from it that time. The first time I saw it, it was, this is actually Eliza's story.
Right, yeah.
Like, that's how I read it from that actress. And this time around, I don't know, like, I'm still digesting what hers is, to be honest.
What I got from the movie is because she's singing about not knowing what the legacy will be and will people remember her and will they remember Alexander Hamilton, and that she kind of looks out into the house and it's almost a moment where she gets a vision of the show,
Of the future.
and
Oh my
she
God.
sees the audience and she
Yes.
she for a moment breaks out and acknowledges what's going on in the room, and then the lights go out and it's the end.
You know
what I
what?
mean?
I've got chills. That's right. I've got chills from you
That's how
saying
I
that. I'm
kind of
like,
heard it.
oh my God, that's exactly what it seems to be.
Yeah.
That reaction of like, oh my God, our story is here. Oh my
Yeah.
God, don't. I'm emotional now. I have chills. I don't cry at things, guys.
Well, that's good.
You're right, Richard. Oh my God, Richard, that is the perfect like, honestly, it stuck with me. That was the part that stuck with me all
Yeah.
night. I was mulling over this because, as I just said to you, I thought it was that she saw her love. I thought it's that she realized the story was about her. And this one, I was just like, wow, what's that one?
Yeah,
Oh, and that's exactly right. Here we are in this moment in time.
yeah.
Look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now. Oh, Richard!
Okay, let's wrap it up. The last thing I want to say is
Never.
it's so rare to have, I mean, obviously it's so rare to have something that's as much of a phenomenon as Hamilton anyway, but to have something that is such a massive, huge success and also is so good, you know what I mean? It's not like you have, you know, the Kardashians are a massive cultural phenomenon, but you know,
What a parallel.
but you know what I
what a
mean? Like,
parallel of
but that's
things.
that's exactly what I mean. That, you know, they're so shit. And
It's in the zeitgeist.
And you
It's in the
have
zeitgeist.
incredible works of art that are not. And so, you know, I was thinking of like the Beatles are an example of like at the same time being like the absolute best at what they do and
Yes.
also being incredibly successful. Or maybe like going back to like Charles Dickens, you know, like it's really rare for someone
A
to be
seminal work. We're
but
here for a seminal work.
absolutely
Yes.
to be this
Yeah.
hugely successful whilst also being incredibly brilliant and groundbreaking.
I like that Lynn carries this because he's like more than an EGOT. He's like an EGOT P everything. Like
He's got it.
I don't know. Could you call it
EGOT P.
PGOT now with
Pegger.
Pulitzer Prize?
Pegger.
Everything. Yeah, Pegger. But now
And
that
Peg it.
weight is on his shoulders. And peg it. But that weight of something so tremendous on his shoulders, and then him just being like side characters in movies now is just so
know.
funny.
And
Like,
you know what? He's
it's-
directing a movie version of Tick Tick Boom. Sure.
I
okay.
actually did hear that green dress. God, Tick Tick Boom, not one of my favorite musicals at all.
He was in it, so maybe it's close to his heart. But sure.
He's got a lot of things close to his heart. He needs to do Bye Bye Birdie. Now hearing that Conrad Birdie story, I want to see him
Oh
play
my God!
Conrad
What if
Birdie.
Lynn just spends the rest of his career just squandering all of the goodwill by just like making really bad decisions for himself as an actor?
won't.
No, of course he won't. Do we know
I
what he's
hope he
working on
does,
next?
though.
Do we have any idea what he's working on? What his next show might
He's
be?
working on a cure for COVID-19, clearly.
Well, if he could get on with it, I'll happily give him another Pulitzer Prize.
Well, he's just filmed or finished filming, what is it called? Not Dark Matter.
his Dark
it's
Materials.
the Goldest
yeah.
Dark
No, but I'm
Materials,
not
his
talking
Dark
about
Materials.
acting-wise. I'm talking about what's he going to write next.
Well, he's always got stuff going on in his brain, I think. Like, he talks about that on Conan's podcast, and Conan asks, and he's just like, as he said, it takes like, this took 7 years, and 1 out of 5 shows make it.
Yeah.
At the same time, give him a rest. He also did In the Heights, and he's doing the movie.
No,
so
I'm not
it's
going
like,
to
it's
give him a
probably...
rest. It's been like 4 years since he left Hamilton. And stop acting. I'm just looking at his upcoming projects. He's writing new songs with Alan Menken for the forthcoming live-action movie of The Little Mermaid.
And Moana as well, remember? He wrote that song.
He did. He wrote all of the songs, didn't he?
Yeah. I think it's a combination of people that wrote.
He's been working on, obviously, the film adaptation of In the Heights, directing movie adaptation of Tick Tick Boom.
He also has a 4 or 5 year old child, don't forget. He's also
Interested.
working on
Not
his
interested.
child.
He's also got hundreds of millions of dollars so he can afford childcare. He's providing 11 new songs for Vivo, a new Sony Pictures animation.
Oh, okay. So he's busy. He's not writing a musical per se, but he is writing music.
Yeah, I'm going to need a new musical from him. Like, I appreciate that, I'm not saying I need it now, but I at least need to know that he started working on it and we might get it in 8 years' time.
Do you hope it's like he does the Lionel Bart,
And just writes terrible shows.
writes terrible shows for the rest of his career? I hope that
Just flop after flop.
it just like circles back, and then he's just like, okay, let's just do Hamilton again, and I'll write it this time a little less problematic. Like,
Yeah, he'll just
So
go
I
back
think
and play
he's-
Hamilton
yeah.
again for the rest of his career. Oh. No.
I can't wait for his next
Whatever
thing.
his next thing
I'm
is, I
excited.
bet it's going to be incredible, and I bet it's going to surprise us. Like, we could sit here and say, what's he going to do next? And just like Hamilton, it'll be something like, oh, wow, really? Okay. And it'll be amazing.
Wait.
Can't wait.
What a joy to be alive.
Don't keep us waiting too long, Lynn.
Look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now.
Perfect ending. You
Yes!
just have to gasp. Just look into the...
Oh my god, the gasp! Don't you brought it back to the gasp. I'm so moved by what you thought it was! Oh, it's exactly that. It's exactly that, Richard. Oh, don't bring me back there. I'm not ready. It's like the morning for me. It's the nighttime for you. I have to live my day knowing this now.
Thank you for listening to Every Musical Ever. I'm your host, Richard Carroll. This theme music was composed and performed by Brent Hill, with the alternative version performed by Sheridan Harbridge. The artwork for the show was designed by Achi. The introduction, content warning, and outroduction were read by Leo Campbell. Please rate and review us wherever you found this podcast. Find us on social media at Every Musical Pod, and visit our Patreon for more content. See you next week.
Every musical ever.
Thank you for listening to Every Musical Ever. If you liked it, you can give a star review on the Apple Podcast app or wherever you found this podcast. And don't forget to subscribe.